Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where I talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the Winchesters, Season 1, Episode 11. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So picking up in the aftermath of last episode, what I kind of thought was going to happen kind of did end up happening. Well, first and foremost, like I said, maybe it's just me reading too much into it, but there was that look on Millie's face last episode that I kept stressing, being like, man, it almost feels like there's a part of her that's like, could John do it? Like, even if she didn't, obviously he can explain, like, oh, Kyle was an Akrita. It's still a thing of, in that moment, because they've been building up, the fact is that was kind of a concern of hers, that John's had a lot of issues that, obviously, going off to war did not help with that. In fact, it probably exacerbated a lot of that, so, and she's been worried about, like, him potentially being a ticking time bomb. So even if she didn't, like, be like, oh, like, there probably was a quick second that crossed her mind, maybe, but either way, she gave him a car to get out of there. He made it to the bunker and met up with everyone and told them what happened. And obviously it's like, well, why are the Akrita doing this? Like, why would they go out of their way to set John up? And it's like, well, they knew enough to use Kyle to get to John. Fact is, all the cops in Lawrence are looking for him. Kyle, the Akrita inside of Kyle, backdated stuff, left a whole bunch of journals being like, yeah, I had an encounter with John, even though John's only met the dude 2 times. The once when we found out about him being an Akrita, and then the episode he killed himself. That's the only 2 interactions John had with the guy. So that sucks majorly. And it puts Mary in this complicated spot, because it's like, yeah, this is a guy, like, she liked and was friends with, but it's also like, oh, cool. Now it's also a situation of he died, and now she's probably thinking also, it's not just about, because now these are 2 people that were affected kind of because of her world. It's like, right, John was always a part of this world. He just didn't realize he was because of his dad being a man of letters. But it's also like, yeah, Kyle's a victim of this, and now that's being used against John. Which initially they were going to leave town because of it, but obviously Betty has been following him and knew where to. And it's like, right, turn yourself in. Do not make this harder for me. And it's like, I didn't kill Kyle. She's like, right, if that's the case, due process and everything. It's like, well, the cards are stacked against John, but they don't all find that out until later on, because it's like, the thought was, well, now that we found out about Kyle, who else in Lawrence has been infected? Like, you don't know who's been infected by the Akrita until you see the marks on her neck. I mean, you think they would have gotten better at covering that up, but it's like, I don't know if there's anything. I was like, I mean, I'm sure cosmetics were good enough that you could probably, like, put makeup on that, but they're like, why get caught up? I mean, they think less of humans, so they're like, who cares about some of that human stupid stuff? We don't need to. It's like, knowing what we are, most people aren't going to know, and even those who know, you can't do anything about it, so. John gets brought in, and the detective that's talking to him is one of the Akrita, and it's like, once again, using his past against him. It's like, yes, John still struggles with everything, even to the point Carlos was like, man, this almost feels like that war god situation from, what was that, episode 6 or 7? He's like, yeah, it kind of feels like that all over again. But it's like, no, we believe John, but it's still, the fact is that even has to enter their head. Kind of, it's kind of sad. But, yeah, like, John's past being used against him. That's why they chose him out of anybody, because he has, I mean, Mary has a record too, but I think they felt like John would be the easiest to get to, especially because of Betty's connection. Like, Betty was going to be, like, the easiest one to kind of slip the noose around his neck, essentially. But yeah, this is all about them trying to find Dean. So, once again, I backed and forth from one, and kind of was like, that looks like it's Dean, but I was like, maybe I'm mistaken. It's like, no, it's definitely got to be Dean. Which is so interesting too, because it's like, oh, we're trying to find out about this guy. Who is he and why is he helping you? And John's like, I have no idea. It's like, oh, you're being stubborn. It's like, legitimately, they have no idea. They believe, like, all right, this guy working with you, you must know who he is. They have no idea. But for John, it's like, now I see. The fact is that you're up here willing to beat the crap out of me in an interrogation room kind of proves that you're desperate to find this guy, because your leader that was inside of Roxy was like, yeah, nothing of this world can hurt you. But the fact of the matter is, if you're this scared of this guy, it's because he's not of this world. Which is interesting, considering, like, I mean, he is. Dean's human. But I guess the argument is, well, if he's from another time, I guess, because he would time traveled, it makes him a time traveler, not making him technically of this world. So maybe, he has future knowledge and stuff like that. Plus there's also, I guess also you make the argument, it's like, he probably doesn't have access to everything he does present day, but he probably knows the equivalencies of what he could do. He knows ingredients of stuff like, they might not know that the hunters might not know about this thing back here in the 70s, but I can still, the ingredients to make a certain thing or whatever exist, so I can make do with it. So he can make something technically otherworldly. So that's why I'm like, because he himself, that's why I'm also like, it also depends on like, when in the story, if this is Dean, when is this Dean? Is this like super deep into supernatural? Then like he most definitely has like an angel blade on him or something, which is super otherworldly. So I don't know. Like I said, not unless this is supposed to correlate as kind of an alternate timeline take on the time he time traveled back in time. Wasn't it specifically Castiel that sent him back in time? There was that angel he had a thing with, but sadly ended up having to kill her because she was trying to stop the apocalypse, and she just went about it a way that he didn't agree. Didn't she time travel or something? Like she was an angel that he fell for. Was it Anna? Was that her name? I legitimately don't remember. I'm just curious, in the supernatural timeline, when is this supposed to take place? Well, it'll probably be a little while before we end up getting a definitive answer on that. Maybe they'll keep it vague enough kind of so it can be at any point in time, kind of like a side adventure, kind of like similar how John technically time traveled. I think I even used this example before, where John time traveled and older John met. It's like one time he was like on a hunt when he was still alive, and he ended up seeing Sam and Dean and meeting Mary again, and when he wakes up it was almost just like a dream to him. So yeah, maybe something in that same regard. Of like, yeah, this would just be Dean waking up and being like, that was a wild dream. Because the time he did time travel, he did remember it. So I'm sure he's going to remember this. I don't know. Once again, we'll have to wait and see. But either way. But now now they know, like, right, this guy is super, super important. Like, we do need to get him because whoever he is, the Kree are afraid of him. Problem is, it showed that John doesn't really know who this guy is. So, hey, no point in keeping you alive anymore. So, all the while this is happening, Lata and Carlos are doing their thing, which we'll circle back to later. But it's, let's circle to Mary and Millie. And Millie wants to bring Betty onto the focus. Like, right, there's got to be cops that are Akrita, so we need a cop of our own. Because even Mary's like, no, there's no way they got to Betty. Like, I could see it in her eyes how much it really hurt her to, like, arrest John. So, try to bring her into the fold. I was like, that's the complicated. Hey, Betty, you wouldn't be the first cop brought into the fold in this. Well, technically speaking, in this continuity of what we know of this continuity, technically speaking, you would be, because, like, once again, like, Kim Rhodes' character hasn't been brought into the fold yet, so. Obviously, this is decades before then, but still, you get what I'm saying. Either way, I love that, she obviously did not believe them. It's like, yeah, you have to see the supernatural world firsthand, like, just seeing all the stuff. She thinks it's this, she thinks Mary's crazy, but the fact is, she's like, no, Millie, like, the fact is you would even bring me here, I came alone in good faith, because you said this was going to help John. It's like, no, this is real. All the weird stuff that's happened in Lawrence, it's weird. I've seen it firsthand. I dealt with vampires, literally, the episode before last. It's like, yeah, this is all real. But for Betty, it's like, right, no rational person's going to jump and believe like all of this is real, no matter what. You'd have to give them some definitive proof, especially because she thinks, you're all kind of crazy, and you're whatever craziness this is, you mix John up in. Which I even love that even her and Mary kind of duked it out a little bit. It's like, right, it's two people on opposite sides who care about John. She's trying to handle things the lawful way. Mary, it's like a screw the law if it's going to screw over someone that's 100% innocent. So Mary even went to the point, she was like, you know what, I'm just going to bust John out. Millie's like, no. You're going to break a whole bunch of laws in the process, which is really sweet. But it's also at the same time, it's like, yeah, but like, if John's going to get shipped off to prison, especially because they made it clear, like, like the transport vehicle is going to have an accident. It's going to be a shame that you and everyone died in it. So, yeah. And even if that wasn't the case, they probably could set it up so that there's some prisoners in prison that were, or they could just hire some. It's like, hey, we'll hook you up if you end up killing this guy for us. So, but it's like, hey, why go through the trouble of getting him processed and putting him in jail? Let's kill him before he even makes it to the prison. So, But yeah, Mary was like, you know what? I'm gonna bust him out of here. Like, I wonder, is it just some form of, once again, like a lot of what later on, I mean, and it's something Betty's always said, was just kind of like, right, whatever you got John mixed up into. I think there is a part of her, regardless of his lineage as a man of letters, it is still a thing of, I kind of brought him into this world. And also, you know, they love each other, so she's like, I got your back, I'm going to make sure nothing happens to you. So all the while that's happening, we circle back to the Lotta and Carlos thing, because they're looking for a bracelet that's supposed to kind of show you the truth of things. Maggie had it, but she didn't ever tell anyone except for Lotta. And it's like, oh, and Mary's like, why didn't she ever tell me about it? Her and Lotta had a very special relationship where, like, Maggie would vent about everything, which is, I'm sure that's going to be a complicated feeling for Mary, because I think for Mary, it's like, I thought we were, like, we're not just only family, I thought we were best friends, because Maggie was like a sister to her, and it's like, wait to find out, like, there's a lot she kept from me that she only told Lotta. Like, it's not going to be that big, but I think maybe on some level it might affect Mary, because it's like, right, if I didn't know this about Maggie, what else do I not know? So those might be future conversations between Lotta and Maggie. But either way, this bracelet's supposed to show you the truth of things. I love that Carlos is like, wait, what? You went to see Alice Cooper without me with Maggie? He's like, yeah, sorry. He's like, retroactively, I will never forgive you for this. But they end up finding the bracelet because of where Maggie had hidden it. But it turns out the bracelet doesn't necessarily work. Well, it does, but it reveals things, but only because it's like, oh, you have a dark secret. Didn't expect it. I thought the whole thing was like, right, it forces whoever you put on it to tell the truth. Technically it does, because it's like, if you don't tell the truth, it's going to consume you, but it didn't work the way I thought it would. Like, the moment Lotta put it on, it forces her to tell her deep secret, her dark truth, and we ended up learning a lot about Lotta. I did think it was interesting that the room that I was like, that's a very specific room for Carlos to end up in, and it turns out this is connected to Lotta's dark secret. We finally learned the issue. Well, they reference it too. Like a couple episodes back, she talked a little bit about our family circumstances. She really leans into it this episode, where she had a caretaker, kind of a nanny, who was who kind of raised her, and basically it's like, oh, there was an extra dish that she figured like, oh, my parents wouldn't mind because it's extra, and Lotta went to go share it with her. Her father found out and was like, oh, this person stole it, but she's like, no, I'm the one that did it, don't blame her. But it's like her father wouldn't listen, and he was going to strike her, and Lotta ended up striking him with a lamp instead, the very same lamp, which I think that speaks volumes that the entire time Carlos was there, he was trying to light it up, but he couldn't. But the moment Lotta was there, she was able to light it up, because this is her secret. So I guess that kind of makes it so in this world, the only one who has the power to shed any light in this world that's getting darker, getting colder, is Lotta. So that's why it wouldn't work for Carlos, because this is connected to Lotta. She's the only one that kind of technically has the power to shed the light here, to tell the truth. And so she ends up explaining what happened. And it's like, right, that everything you're saying is 100% on your dad, but she has guilt over the fact is that her father took her to her mother sided with her father's like, how dare you pick this person over your own family? You should have let your father, like, it's like, right, they blamed her. And so Lotta felt like, right, my family's going to like look at me as a disappointment, so she ended up leaving, but she didn't leave with her nanny, and her nanny had to stay behind, and the family took it out on her, being like, right, you're the reason why my daughter like is so disobedient. Locked her in that very room, and she froze to death. And Lotta's been carrying that guilt, but we knew there was something going on with, because it sounded like previously she was talking to maybe her brother or something, so we don't know, like, it seemed like it was implying like she was talking to maybe like a brother, maybe it was a sister, but I think maybe more so like a brother, but it sounded like a sibling. And he was like, oh yeah, tell mom something. So I think those are the only interactions she has with her family, is through like a sibling being a medium between them. So kind of a liaison between them. And yeah, it is kind of sucky that, That isn't on Lotta. That is her parents being super unreasonable. Understandable why you want nothing to do with your family. Like that's traumatic and terrible, and the guilt she felt over that. You know, and luckily they were able to return because she finally told her dark secret. Doesn't help that the bracelet manifested itself as Maggie, and it's like, here I am telling you everything. But think about the real Maggie. I mean, how guilty and how sad she would have felt knowing she was pouring her heart out. She was telling you everything, but you were keeping stuff to yourself. It's like, it's hard to tell that truth. She didn't tell it to anybody. And, you know, Carlos was like, right, I won't tell anybody. And even later on, she's like, right. How you think John and Mary will react? And it's like, how they react to you will now change. Carlos is like, they will love you. They won't love you any less than I love you too. You know, that won't change, because even Carlos was like, yeah, everyone has their dark secrets. They have their situations. John's dark secrets and stuff is a little more out front just because of everything. So he kind of doesn't have much of a choice in that regard. So, and they've seen kind of his darker side. Carlos is firsthand seen that darker side, so it's not like it's secrets. And I think that's the thing of like, John couldn't judge you. Also, once again, everyone can see that was 100% on your parents for being unreasonable. Very monstrous thing for them to do. But her guilt stems from the fact is, I left her to suffer all of that. If I stayed behind, maybe I could have done something to defend her. But like, yeah, I got away from the situation and I left her behind, and she died because of it, you know? But the bracelet, they end up ultimately putting it on Betty, which is like, oh, I hope you don't have any dark secrets, which I guess she doesn't because it never came up. But she's able to finally see the Accretive for what they are. She sees like this, basically like a live stream, like cord connecting them to their world, like flying up into the sky. So she knows this is the truth, and so they help set up the thing of like, cool, Betty keeps her undercover status by, you know, Carlos knocking her out, got to make it look good, but they were able to get John out. And so now John and Mary have to lay low while Betty works with Millie and the others to try and clear his name. So it's like, but the problem is the Creed are very good about it because they made sure there was no witnesses, not unless there are some witnesses who are just too scared to come forward. But it's like, yeah, there's no one there that can prove, like, yeah, no one saw Kyle break in. No one could prove that, like, Kyle was there before John, like, you know, like no one can verify that story. And they did a really good job of this frame up. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see how that all plays out good. At the same time, John and Mary are going to find Dean, so that's definitely going to be interesting to see what that interaction looks like. Because, of course, the people he's going to encounter, it only makes sense that the people he encounters will end up being his parents, you know? What excuse he comes up with, what backstory he comes up with. I mean, obviously, you have enough identities and stuff for you to be able to cover your bases. He'll still be like, yeah, my name is Dean, but he'll probably like say something else, or maybe he will just give a full fake name. We'll have to wait and see. But it's definitely going to be interesting to see ultimately where all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.